People who ran into the weird kid from school years later, how did he or she turn out? My friend's dad told him about weird classmate he had. Nobody really took him seriously. When they were in their last grades, that kid decided that right after school he will be growing fungi instead of studying. Everyone laughed at him. And guess what? Right now he owns probably the largest organic farm business both in the country and most likely in the whole region. We had a kid that would do weird shit in front of other kids for attention. Climb into bins, eat old food out of the bins, let people throw yogurt over him, dive into bushes, that sort of thing. Otherwise he seemed mostly harmless. Ended up in prison for pouring a kettle of boiling water over a guy and a girl who he fancied. They were at a house party. He saw her talking to a guy, so he went to the kitchen, boiled the kettle, then calmly walked up to them and poured it over their heads. I'm not sure he had ever even spoken to her, but he was seemingly jealous that she was talking to another guy. Then after he was released from prison for that, he took his mother's car on a joyride with two of his mates, crashed into a car driven by an elderly couple, then ran off leaving his two mates dead and the elderly couple badly injured. I think he's still in prison for that. Not quite as bad, but we had another weird kid who would talk to no one and would spend all day drawing graffiti in a sketchbook, which he guarded with his life. Not good graffiti, he just kept drawing his tag in different fonts. I think it was aspect or some other badly spelt word. If he spoke it was usually just to tell people how great he thought Banksy was. He ended up spraying this tag all over our small and otherwise graffiti-free Englishy town, and was immediately arrested after his old teachers recognized it. I think the sketchbook was used as evidence. He was then arrested a second time for spraying his tag on the side of the courthouse in front of half a dozen CCTV cameras. I bumped into him a year or so back, and he now works for a charity which runs a kids club in the next town over. He teaches kids how to skate and BMX as well as running street art classes, where they legally decorate the skate park with graffiti. I won't say I ran into him, but I occasionally drive past the penny kid walking around slumped in a leather jacket and greasy hair on a hot summer day. I really have no idea what he's doing with his life, but he still seems pretty weird. Back in high school he was always collecting change that he'd find on the ground, and I found out later he actually saved up $500 or so and donated it to charity. I thought a lot differently about him once I found out she was actually doing really well. I almost didn't recognize her because she looked so much different. She'd joined the military, so was cleaned up, in better shape, etc., and seemed like she was happy. Sadly she died in a car accident a year or so later. Girl in high school used to be really to herself. Super into anime. Just assumed she was shy, so I'd make a point to have small chats with her every day until one day she said her pillow wasn't ducking her right. Apparently her pillow had conscience and she used it to masturbate. Graduated a few months later. Fast forward to about 3 months ago. I'm making coffee at a cafe when said girl walks up to me. She's super polite and bubbly, but as I ask how her day is going she tells me the demon that had raped her was actually her guardian angel and she needed him around or something. Haven't seen her since. Ran into the kid who was effectively the school bully. He wasn't a physical bully, but made fun of everyone and was just mean in general at the bank one day and I didn't even recognize him. He walks up to me holding his daughter and gave me a classic white guy well goddamn it, how the hell are ya? And this is gonna sound crazy, but he legit became the nicest guy in the world. Extremely well adjusted, great family, great career. He invited me to go out to the driving range the following Sunday, and for whatever reason I was inclined to go. Wound up hitting golf balls and smoking JS with him for most of the day and had a heart-to-heart. Turns out he was terribly abused his entire life and his father punished him by forcing him to stay awake all night. He was petrified to go home, so he did whatever he could to get detention. Explains a lot. Never judge someone until you've walked a mile in their shoes. From elementary school, weird girl with an antichrist vibe. I had a crush on her, never talked, punched other people but no one messed with her because somehow we knew something was wrong with her. Found her Instagram some 3 to 4 years ago. She's a very good makeup artist, working for television and weddings. She really knows her stuff. From middle school, there was this guy who never talked. Also he always was like, smiling to himself, very tall. He literally disappeared. Family has been looking for years now. Never been found to this day. Maybe had some mental issues. From high school, this awkward punk dude in my class, who went off the grid for about 10 years, found him last year through a common friend. Turns out he is gay and thought no one would accept him, so he cut ties. After that he was in an abusive relationship and his BF didn't let him talk to anyone. Calmed down significantly and is happily married now. He acted out in school because he was being abused by his foster parents at home. Nobody knew at the time. IDK he keeps making shitty edits of Drew, Pickles from the Rugrats going places around town, and talking in a text-to-speech voice. There was this kid in junior high that was really quiet and had no friends at the time. One day my English teacher pulls me out of the classroom and asks me to befriend him because he didn't have friends. So I did, and we became friends. We went to different high schools so kinda lost connection. He would text me every now and he found me on Facebook when he was working on his engineering degree. He is now married and works for SpaceX as an engineer. There was this very weird kid who was known for masturbating in class in 8th grade and ended up dropping out of school. Last year I see on the news that he robbed a bank. He slid a note saying I have a gun. Give me all of your money, and the bank teller handed him a duck ton of $1 and $5 bills to stall while police showed up. He left before police arrived, but they found him shortly after because he left his entire handprint on the glass door when he pushed it open on his way out. Edit: the handprint is not how police found him. He did leave the handprint on the glass though. It was just something I wanted to include in the story. Bad wording on my part. Sorry about that. Still seems about the same. Natural dislike to anyone who tries to talk to him. Assumes everyone is out to get him. Has also put on about 100 pounds and he wasn't a small guy to begin with. I saw her at a con I was working, where she came up to my guest and was telling him about her book that she hadn't started writing, but was due the next day and still had 10,000 words left to write. She also kept looking at her phone and dramatically sighing and saying things about how she wished her publisher would leave her alone. So still making up things to try and make herself look better. They were twins. The eldest of the two is in prison for rape, assault, armed robbery and grand theft auto. The younger is a police officer who arrested him. The weird thing is that in high school they were the complete opposite of what they are now. Met the younger last year after 7 years of not seeing them. I've told this before, but my dad told me about a kid he went to high school with who used to sit in the back of the class mumbling and giggling to himself all the time. Occasionally he'd pick his nose and eat the results. Despite this, my dad said he was apparently really smart and got all A's. He told me the guy's name, and since it was pretty distinctive, I looked him up online. He was a federal appeals court judge. It's only a couple years out of high school at this point, but one of my good friends is high functioning autistic and thus was considered very weird in high school. Has found a job stocking the refrigerators at a local supermarket and is enjoying that from what he tells me. Has taking classes on and off at a local university but doesn't know what he wants to go into. Has also getting into writing fan fiction and is continuing his passion for Lego. On a side note, his creations in Lego are super impressive, especially considering his limited resources. There was a girl at my school who I will call Melanie. Melanie was easily the most socially awkward / unaware girl I've ever met. Like, masturbating at school awkward. Picking her nose and eating it publicly awkward. By the end of high school, she had figured out how to not do these insane things that made people stare and laugh at her, but needless to say, she had a rough go. But she was also one of those people who was a really nice, genuine person. I moved away after college and didn't have FB until at least 10 years after graduation, so I had no idea what most of my classmates were doing. Maybe 5 years ago, I spotted her and friended her. She ended up marrying this guy who went to our school and was maybe 3 years older than us. I knew him from work and he asked me out at one point. He was also really nice but super nerdy and socially awkward. I didn't think about it at the time, but when I saw she married him, I was like, oh my god, they're perfect for each other. They moved to a state that has a bunch of mountains and they don't have any children. So they're always posting all these amazing hiking and rock climbing adventures they're doing together. They go to all kinds of festivals together. Renaissance, I think, Star Trek, horror, etc. They look super happy, and I talked to her grandma last year, who told me they're happy as clams. I'm just so happy for her. : The type of weird that you wanted to have as a friend rather than not. I have a few too many stories with this kid in middle/high school. He was a kleptomaniac, had illegal, exotic and dangerous pets, obsession with knives/weapons, had no regard for normal social standards and cues. Despite him being an innately skilled entrepreneur, he was a general menace to society. I went off to college and later learned his home was raided by ATF. His father had been manufacturing automatic weapons for the Latin Kings, and they charged him on a unregistered gun and pot/shroom chocolates found in his room. Last I heard of him, after he got out of prison, was on a flyer for a community board advertising basic around the house labor, with his head superimposed on a cartoon Superman. I met him at a bus stop, and I only managed to say, hey, how are you? What are you doing nowadays? He responded in cat meow meow and ran away across the road, where he almost got hit by a car in the process. I didn't see him come back to take a bus. I suppose he turned into a furry or something. Still weird. Not as weird as in high school, when he invited me over to have frozen pizzas and watch Animal Planet, the original Netflix and chill. Eater, he asked every single day in science class, without fail. Then he wiped his boogs on the front of my desk. We had a kid who thought he was a ninja. He even wore the shoes with the split toes. Ended up getting busted talking 12-year-old girls online into 6 at a local park. While awaiting trial, was busted by internet vigilantes posing as underage girls going after multiple faked accounts. His trial was on the news quite a bit. About 10 years later there was a expose on conditions at a prison, and he was interviewed working out in the yard. Few years after his release, a news crew knocked on his door for one of those pedophiles in your neighborhood. Do you know where they are? Segments. One of the kids from back in school has a very nice compilation of all of these segments. At a 10-year high school reunion, met up with two guys. One who was captain of the football team, always had the hot chicks. You know the type. The other who had been a painfully shy and awkward nerd that was shunned and made fun of. Overheard the conversation when the nerd instigated it with Mr. Football, which went something like this. Hey, what have you been doing with yourself? Mr. Football said he was in the Navy, I forget the rank, and was a cook at the Brigaka Navy jail. Nerd replied, hey, I joined the Navy too. He went on to very humbly say he was a lieutenant, commander, fighter pilot, and was working on his PhD in some sort of engineering field. He walked off. True revenge of the nerd. Just saw a guy who ran with a weird crowd at my school. They were the anime/manga type crowd, but I always respected them for doing what they enjoyed. He approached me at the local gym. Very polite, respectful guy always, and I found out he was working and playing into bands. I'm glad he came up to me, and I'm extremely glad he's doing what he loves to do. Let people do what they do, as they'll probably let you do what you love to as well. Last time I saw him, he was running across campus. Although he wasn't late for class, he did this in HS all the time. I caught his attention and we walked and chatted. He was my friend in HS. He's doing great. Weird is good. Weird hugging girl. Just saw her about a month ago. She's a teacher now and living the American dream. I can tell her favorite teacher was also mine. She operates just like him. She's on a successful path. Homeboy whose parents adopted him for the tax break is happily married with children. He found love, and despite everything going against him is successful. High school students of Reddit, just because they're that kid does not mean they are not human. Be humble. We've all been that kid.
N.